Can you hold 1 second, Cooper, or not? Nope. Welcome to the conversation with Al McFarlane. Glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Today we're talking about business, boxing, and more games with the brother Lamont Jones. It'll be a great conversation. Stay tuned for it. I want to first, though, thank all of you who check in with us via the various social media platforms. We thank you for checking in with us, for following us, liking us. We're trying to get our numbers in the YouTube space to be our lead. And for that, we ask you to go to YouTube Insight News MN and become a subscriber. Subscribe, like, and share. We're north of 600. We want to get 1,000 subscribers. We have many more following us on Twitter and on LinkedIn. We want you on Twitter, you on LinkedIn, and you on Facebook to mosey over to the Insight News page on YouTube and subscribe there. But then you check us out wherever you do. We appreciate it. If you want to comment on today's program or be on the program, drop a note to Cooper at insightnews.com or drop a note in the comment section. Whichever platform you're on, we can see your comments and engage, and thank you for participating. Either way, let us know your name and where you are, where you're watching. Any likes, dislikes, recommendations, we love that as well. With that, let me introduce my guest today. Lamont Jones, attorney Lamont Jones, is a card game enthusiast, and he's a boxing business attorney. He serves as General Counsel for Haymon Boxing Management, which is the creator of the premier boxing champions platform, and he's advisor for numerous elite professional boxing champions, contenders, and prospects. He is a former Olympic movement executive. Jones served as the executive director of the USA Boxing and General Counsel of USA Track and Field. He also established and led an in-house legal department for the Aspen Institute. And so he started his legal career with Quinn Emanuel in Los Angeles and Baker Botts in Houston before representing leading boxing industry figures in contract negotiations, litigations, and trials. Before law school, he competed in more than 200 amateur boxing bouts. He's a graduate of Columbia Law School, where he was a Harlan Fiske Stone Scholar and a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of University of Oklahoma. He's enjoyed playing cards with a diverse range of people, starting in his hometown in the Little Dixie section of Oklahoma, as well as in and on Ivy League campuses, in white shoe corporate law firm settings, and with characters in the rough and tumble boxing business. He believes that card games connect people and that the rich story of Bid Whist deserves to be widely known. Well, when you say Bid Whist to anybody black, I know for sure everybody's ears perk up and their smiles get on their face, because Bid Whist is a ritual, and card games are a ritual in our community as well. So I'm excited to have this conversation. Brother Jones, good afternoon. Welcome to the conversation with Al McFarlane, man.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction. I tell you, I couldn't have written that any better myself.
Well, whoever wrote it did a good job. Thank you so much. Well, you know, and that's the name of this game. Tell the truth, tell the story, right? And if we don't tell our story, who will? And so I'm pleased to present your story and pleased to also engage with you in conversation today around all the things you do. But let's start off talking about whist. Sure. And when you say Bid Whist to black folks, everybody tunes in on one accord all the time. And some people can play well, some people can't play well, but everybody knows the game and they know the spirit of the competition that Bid Whist represents. And it's not only just playing the cards, but it's the psychology, and it's the reading your partner, reading your opponents, and what else? I mean, it's just amazing. It's community. But talk about Bid Whist first of all, and the cards in general, Bid Whist in particular.
You know that, man. I think the game is sort of a combination of sort of the risk-taking swagger of poker and the strategic engagement of bridge. So it's all rolled into one. And you alluded to this, but Professor Henry Louis Gates calls it the national black pastime.
Right?
So you hinted at the competition, and I like what you said about the spirit. You probably could have even mentioned the smack talk, because that's a big part of that competition.
That's what I meant.
and a big part of that spirit. But it's from the family of trick-taking games for folks who don't play cards. And what I mean by that, well, first of all, it's a partnership game, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not like blackjack where you're playing against the dealer, or it's not like poker where you're playing against all the other players at the table. You have a partner, and you and your partner compete against another partnership. So that's number one. Number two, while those four players are around the table, at a certain point in time, each of them will lay a card on the table, will play a card, okay? Mm-hmm. And so there'll be a little pile of 4 cards there. A lot of people call that a book. A lot of people call it a trick, right? Whoever's played the best card will win that trick. Mm-hmm. So in addition to being a partnership game, Bid Whist is a trick-taking game. Mm-hmm. And then third, and this gives it a little bit of the juice, before the trick-taking action starts, there's a conversation, okay? And one of the partnerships might say, hey, there are 13 available tricks. I think I can win. We think we can win 8 of them, okay? Well, the other partnership says, you know what? We think we can win 9 of them, right? Mm-hmm. So we'll get a chance to put our plan into action if we make the best bid there. So yeah, it's a partnership game. It's a trick-taking game. It's a strategy game. Lots of tension, lots of intensity, and lots of fun.
So when did you start playing Bid Whist, and how did you graduate to it? I think in the community, people see Bid Whist as a relatively sophisticated, partnership. I think people might look at that in the same league as things like you mentioned them, bridge, and another game you mentioned, I forgot which one it was.
Maybe euchre, maybe O'Hell,
or even some parts of poker, Poker,
yeah,
but sure. That's those are all high level intellectual type games, I think.
Absolutely. I would say this to answer the first part of your question. When I was about 10 or 11, my mom taught me how to play spades. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure I might still say spades with my Oklahoma accent. I was born and raised in a little town called Hugo in Oklahoma. But that was so fun and transformative for me because pretty soon I got to play at the adults table, right? And I was a serious spades player throughout my teenage years, throughout my college years. On the first day of law school, I met.
Before you go there, I'm really I'm a cards novice, never was into it, but explain spades. I know spades, but I don't know it because I never played it. Tell me how spades works.
Similar to Bid Whist in that it's a partnership game. Similar in that it's a book taking or trick taking game. So lots of similarities between spades and Bid Whist. Some differences that perhaps we'll get into a bit later. But I'll go back even further because for the 1800s, the 1700s, the 1600s, the most popular game in the world was a game called whist, not Bid Whist, just whist, right?
Okay.
And I didn't say the most popular card game, the most popular game in the world. Okay?
Really?
So that's sort of the tree, the foundational tree. And all the games that we play now are kind of branches from the whist tree. So Bid Whist is a branch on the tree. Hearts, a lot of people play hearts. A lot of people in the Midwest play euchre. That's a branch on the tree. Spades is a branch on the tree. Bridge is a branch on the tree. Pinochle, oh hell. All of these are trick-taking strategic games that are branches on the old whist tree. And so they're all sort of related sibling games. But I was saying that first day of law school, I met 3 fellas who said, hey, you guys want to play some cards? I was like, yeah, let's bust some spades. We can bust some spades right now. That's my game, right? And one of them suggested, hey, I got a game that's even better than spades. I resisted that notion, but they converted me then and there. And man, we were serious about our Bid Whist in law school, so much so that if 3 fellas were in class, if 3 fellas wanted to play and the 4th guy was in class, we'd go get him to bring him out of class, bring him out of the library, so we could get down.
How could you play in the library in a room in a closed off room? I'm sure you couldn't play out in open.
Yeah, we get him from the library, right, and go to one of our spots so that we could conduct this business.
Spades, not spades, but spades, I'm sure, but also whist is an animated game. It's a loud game, and that's where the smack talking. Talk about that element of it.
Yeah, I just think it's just part of the humanity. Like, if you're doing well, you want to let your opponents know about it. You want to let the people who aren't at the table but who happen to be in the room know about it. Mm-hmm. But I always admire how people can, not only be excellent with the cards, but have sort of, verbal acuity and wit, and it's part of the heart and the soul of the game. I like to say that if all the other games in the trick-taking game family, they can be compared to Dolly Parton's excellent song "I Will Always Love You," right? But Bid Whist is that remix that can be compared to the Whitney version of the same song. Because it remixes the elements in a way that adds a little more tension, a little bit more fun. So yeah, Bid Whist to me is the ultimate card game.
So what's that behind you? The gist of Bid Whist. Talk about that.
Yeah, man. That's this has been a labor of love for over a decade. I thought I've seen some books on Bid Whist, but nothing that really sort of gets into the strategy, nothing that provides a comprehensive playing guide to teach people how to play. So over the years, man, I've had a chance to collect a lot of stories and, meet some luminaries who play. And I just think that the game, with its fascinating sort of cultural backstory, deserves to be widely known. And that's why I've written The Gist of Bid Whist.
Well, I'll be glad to get a copy and read it, because I think it's fascinating to study how we are with each other and how we use gamesmanship as proxies, really, for how we make our way in the world. I think our personalities show up at the card table, and our strategy and our intentions show up. They show up organized around a particular endeavor, which is the game at hand. But the game behind the game is the game of life, right? And I think, like chess and other games that are intellectual, these really serve as proxies for how we both negotiate what life deals with us and where we intend to go with whatever we have and how we intend to do it. I said before the show started that, and I've said it already, I'm not really a card player, but you can't be at school and not play cards. I went to Morehouse College in Atlanta, right? And my freshman year, I did my freshman year there, then later at the University of Minnesota. Sure. But that freshman year at Morehouse, man, was cards, and brothers played all day and all night, kept to be up playing, way into the night, loving the game. But no doubt. The most important part of the game was the smack talking. Oh, and the psychology. I mean, these are psych masters, right? And so there's strategy in trying to, present your position and to intimidate, the adversary, to psych them out and to prevail.
No question. I'm with you 100%.
Well, I was a terrible partner, but the good part is that every game I played, every session I had, the Lord was looking at me and after me, because I always got dealt what they call a Boston hand.
Oh yeah.
And when I got it, I said, "Oh, I know what this is."
There you go. We hear him called a Ray Charles hand. They say, even the blind man can play that one. But but man, I'm with you 100% on the fact that the competition's important, the smack talk is fun. But what caused me to write The Gist of Bid Whist is that I realized that what's even more important than all of that is the connection. Right, the bonds that you form, the relationships that you build and that you nurture. I saw this quote not long ago from the visual artist Carrie Mae Weems. It said, "Within seriousness, there is little room for play, but within play, there is tremendous room for seriousness."
Interesting.
And I certainly found that to be the case with my law school buddies, because, for example, as we were playing cards, we were talking about, what's going on in this class or what's going on in that class. What kind of lawyers do we want to be? What kind of fathers, what kind of husbands, what kind of men do we want to be? That sort of thing. So there was certainly some seriousness of purpose there. And also, even later in my career, a lot of people do business development, on the golf course or maybe in the basketball gym, that sort of thing. Bid Whist has certainly led to me developing client relationships and that sort of thing. And it's been just absolutely pivotal in my family relationships and my relationships with my daughter, my son, my wife, my dad-in-law. So, and we get into that in the Just a Bid Whist. We tell those kinds of stories of connection and relationships. And, I'm hoping that people will use the magic of Bid Whist as they build and form and strengthen their own relationships.
That's awesome. So maybe you can pull a piece that you want to read, a couple of pages or several, or a section.
Okay. I like it. Yeah. I like it.
I mean, if you got a couple of pieces, that talk about different elements of the journey that you're on in creating and presenting this book, I'd love to hear.
Yeah. All right. Let me start with something from one of my favorite chapters, chapter 6. I call this chapter Jeopardy, the Golden State Warriors, and the No Trump Advantage. Right. But the piece I'll read, let's see, I'll just start. It says, I recall a promising date with a lovely lady. Let's call her Stacy, who. Am I still with you there, Alan?
Yeah, we got you. Okay. Yeah, you're full screen.
Let's call her Stacy, who unintentionally, I hope, hurt my feelings. Before that fateful moment, our time together had been so enjoyable that I ventured to ask the question that would signal to me whether or not this thing had a chance to really ignite. Do you play Bid Whist? I gently inquired. Her response was not encouraging. No, that game is for old people. I took a swig from my rum and coke to mask the disappointment of an encounter that had suddenly and certainly gone off the rails. Stacy punctuated her dismissal of Bid Whist, and really me, however, in a manner that left a glimmer of hope. My daddy likes that game. He will sit there and play for hours. So I go on from there to talk about meeting Stacy's dad and playing cards with him, and how he helped me see the game differently, because he was a proponent of a bid. They call him Bid Whist the No Trump bid. And that really got me thinking about some of the differences between Bid Whist and bridge. And that caused me to write this chapter, which was the first chapter that I ever wrote. And I break it down there. So I'll say this here quickly, Al. After I left law school, I moved to a different city, and I didn't have a Bid Whist crew there, right? And I missed playing cards. And every day in the newspaper, I'd see something that kind of looked like Bid Whist, turned out to be sort of bridge challenges that they used to put in the newspapers, every day. So I went to a bridge club to take bridge lessons. You had to go for, 8 weeks, Monday night, 3 hours a night, that sort of thing. And it occurred to me even then, man, what if Bid Whist was taught in this sort of way, right? It's structured, it's unintimidating. And that probably planted some of the earliest seeds for me for writing the Just a Bid Whist. So yeah, that again, my hope is to welcome more people to the Bid Whist table, whether you've already played any sort of card games or not.
Well, that's fascinating. I mean, so the obvious question is, have you created, or is there a national or international Bid Whist league? What is the formal structure for getting people who are enthusiasts to each other and to have their common endeavor sort of replicated and celebrated across broad and different communities?
Yeah. I've been fortunate to play in some tournaments over the years. I'm aware of 2 organizations that host local, regional, and national Bid Whist tournaments. One is called Card Sharks, Inc. The other is called the National Bid Whist Alliance. So, I'm hoping that, maybe I can help get some people in by sharing the game with them and teaching the game to them, and that they'll eventually play in those tournaments hosted by those organizations.
So what could happen? I mean, I love the idea of people being together and having a reason, an event, an activity, a passion that allows them to connect and share and to motivate and challenge each other in the spirit of growth and development. This is really what you're talking about is a system of teaching, system of learning, system of knowing, and a system of transferring knowledge from one to the other through the activity called a card game. And so I love that when things like that emerge as opportunities for our people to connect with each other, to, as one person I know said, to intentionally complicate each other's lives in a positive way, right?
Yeah.
And so let me ask you to, with your dream eye focused, what could happen if we were intentional, if the the whist players, bid whist players had an intention of, being a very visible and what's the right word for it, community where people broadly knew and kind of watched, like they watch basketball and baseball for what's going on in this arena, like they watch steppers, in Chicago, right? People follow these things. What would happen in your mind if everything could emerge in ways that were really possible?
Yeah. I think as I mentioned, I've played in some tournaments. The most fun though I have playing Bid Whist is in social settings, like, at this person's home or my home or whatever, I talk in the book about a group of men in Westchester, New York, who've gotten together monthly for more than 28 years.
Wow.
Took a little bit of pause during the pandemic, but there's a group there of about 30 of them, and they get together monthly.
Yeah, we lost you a little bit. Your video froze up on me.
I'm sorry.
There we go. No, we're back. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry about that. But I was just saying that, my hope is that the sort of fellowship that those gentlemen enjoy, the laughter, the connection, we want to share that broadly, right? And I'm hoping that Bid Whist, I'd like to see it in movie and television plot lines. I'd like to see people playing it on campus. I'm ready for someone to write the next Bid Whist book that has better strategic tips and maybe better practice hands than I have in mind. I want someone to write the great Bid Whist novel. But here's the thing that's also really important to me. A key factor of me deciding to write this book was when someone mentioned to me, sort of casually, sort of offhandedly, that the game was popularized by the Pullman porters, right? So that anecdote sparked a desire in me to learn more about that. And one of the great joys of writing this book is learning about how the Pullman porters popularized this game, but also how important the game was for some of the achievements and successes of the Pullman porters. If you don't mind, I'll break that down a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead, please. No, absolutely. It's fascinating.
Yeah. So, the porters in the early decades of the 20th century, they were figures of respect in the Black community.
Well, right? First of all, let's tell somebody might not know. You and I have been around a bit, but somebody might not know about the porters. So do that backgrounding too.
Absolutely. I'll just say that in the early decades of the 20th century, train travel was very critical in the United States, and luxury train travel was a big part of that. And on a given night, there were more people who spent the night on luxury overnight trains than spent in all the top end hotels combined. So that's how critical train travel was to the culture, and the Pullman porters were central to that experience. You might analogize them to flight attendants, but they took care of all the passengers' needs and that sort of thing. But despite the sort of menial aspects of the job, as I mentioned, they were figures of respect and importance in Black communities, right? For one, it was one of the few opportunities that Black people had to have jobs that could get them into the middle class, right? For another thing, they weren't tethered to a job in a particular location. They traveled across the country. So they were cosmopolitan figures. They were urbane figures. And as they traveled, they shared critical information that helped fuel the Great Migration. They might help distribute the Chicago Defender or the Pittsburgh Courier, the Black newspaper. They might say, hey, if you're looking for a job in Minneapolis, you need to go to this part of the city. Or if you're looking for a place to stay in Chicago, you want to go here, that sort of thing. They also shared cultural offerings like different jazz records, different blues records. And they shared their favorite pastime, Bid Whist, which they played so much that it was called the Porter's Game. So because of the respect that the porters commanded in different communities across the country, their game also became popular in different communities across the country. They were critical in popularizing Bid Whist in Black communities.
Amazing, and there are legend stories here in Minnesota about Black men who had medical degrees and law degrees back in the early days that before they could get established in those professions could make more money to support family and create livelihoods working as porters on the trains. And so it was an honorable profession, but it was one of the ways that we had both a presence and created a system in it. You mentioned, in my profession, we own the largest Black newspaper in Minnesota, Insight News, but we follow a great leader in the Black press of America, brother named Cecil Newman, who was the founder of the Minneapolis Spokesman and St. Paul Recorder newspapers, and who was one of the founders of the National Newspaper Publishers Association. And what he and his colleagues did, this is like the Senstex in Chicago and in other places, is they worked with porters to deliver the newspapers to all the communities along the rail line. Wow. Black folks had a system for getting, it was our internet. This was our Twitter, was the porters bringing the information every week, and it was a phenomenal thing. Absolutely. Well, I love the idea that, again, their game, the porters' game, Bid Whist, because it kind of was part and parcel of their mission of elevating our people. And as you mentioned, I could see this description fitting in, that within your joy or your entertainment, there's space for seriousness. And that's kind of what this reflects, I think, is
no doubt. The porters were initially formed in 1925. And not long after that, they had about 4,600 members. But they weren't able to negotiate a contract with the Pullman Company for about 12 years. And during those 12 years, there were some dark times, so much so that the numbers dwindled down to about 600 members. They didn't have a lot of money and that sort of thing. The leader of the porters, A. Philip Randolph, he would travel to different cities, sometimes with the porters passing the hat to pay his fare, to get him back or sneaking him onto the train or whatever. But to spend some time with the members and the people he wanted to be members, to try to keep the morale up. And what he did, the one weapon that he had when he spent time with them was to play Bid Whist, right? So we think now about the porters' later achievements, about how they were instrumental in the civil rights movement, how they provided money and organizing power and people that were critical to the movement. But I like to think that in holding them together and helping to keep their camaraderie together, that sort of thing, Bid Whist was important to the porters, just as the porters were, critical to popularizing the game. And that's why I insisted that on the cover of the Just a Bid Whist, we pay tribute to and acknowledge the Pullman porters.
Amazing. Wonderful, wonderful. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. My guest is Lamont Jones. He's an attorney. He's the author of the book, The Gist of Bid Whist. So tell us, Brother Jones, some of the strategic recommendations that they'll find in the book. What strategies, and strategies can be, taught and learned. They have to be, I think, or you stumble on them. But it's better to learn them by being taught them.
Yeah, man. I mean, again, that's kind of the whole purpose, right? Because I learned the old-fashioned way. I sat down with some people who knew how to play a lot better than I did. I took my lumps. I learned here and there. As my friend, the boxing promoter Rock Newman says, you sit down, you mess up, you take your lumps, you get better, next time. But I did want to sort of lay out some principles and some laws and some strategies to help people have an understanding before they sit down, right? Or to enhance the understanding that you might already have from your previous play. So, and again, I'm very protective of my reader, which is to say, I've heard so many people say stuff like, "Hey, I don't play any card games. I don't have the card playing gene." I'm protective of those readers. So we start with the basics. With the definitions, even as we're telling stories to keep it lively. But before you get through chapter 3, I will have shared with you the 3 foundational card game laws that apply across all the games and the 6 vital strategic principles that you need to know to play Bid Whist well. So
Well,
we
can you
get that in.
summarize those now just to give us an inkling of what to look for when we get the book and read it?
I mean, the three foundational laws are the lead suit law, which we get into, the follow suit law, which, you know, you can probably figure that one out even if you've never played cards, and the trump suit law, the boss suit law. So those are the three foundational laws. And then we get into some principles like, you know, return your partner's suit and clean the streets and that sort of thing. And we break those down for the reader as we go along.
Well, that's awesome. Let me pivot and talk about you and your story. You're a native of Chicago, or where are you from?
Born and raised in Hugo, Oklahoma, which is a town of 5,000 folks down in the southeastern corner of Oklahoma.
Okay. And what's your family story?
Man, you know, my folks are from the area, folks, East Texas and Oklahoma and that sort of thing. I was raised by my grandmother there in Hugo, and so yeah, man, the thing I liked about growing up in Hugo, the thing I appreciate now, is that it's the sort of town that had one school, so all the kids went to the same school. So, you know, the people who we thought were rich, we now know they were probably middle class. They were in school with everybody else, the doctor's kids, the dentist's kids, that sort of thing. So that was I think that was an important socialization lesson. And I think a key distinguishing thing about my childhood is that very early on, when I was 6 years old, we started boxing. So every year, you know, we go to tournaments and box and that sort of thing. So I wound up having more than 200 fights as an amateur boxer.
What weight class were you boxing in? I mean, it's changed over the years.
Oh yeah. I started off, I was 55 pounds, right? By the time I finished my second year of college, I weighed 147, which was but the training that we did in boxing,
middleweight or welterweight?
That's welterweight. Welterweight. Yeah. One of my childhood friends who was on Oklahoma's traveling boxing team with me was a fellow named Tommy Morrison. And Tommy was one weight class higher than I was at the time. I was 139, he was 147. And we wound up boxing each other in a tournament once just because we didn't have other competition. But Tommy went on to star in the Rocky V as Tommy Gunn, and as a professional boxer, he was a heavyweight who beat George Foreman in a match. But the training we did in boxing made the other sports seem a little easier for us, right? So when the other kids were complaining about two-a-days in football, that was just sort of the warm up for us to go to boxing. But that was a big part of my childhood.
Well, let me talk to you more about that. Lessons on boxing that you took into Bid Whist and that you take into your law practice, that you take into being a parent. What are the through lines that come from that instruction and from that experience that have shown up up to now in your life and career?
Yeah, I would have to say, discipline and time management jump out at me, right? And it was an immediate form of discipline and time management, which is to say, you've got a tournament next weekend or a month from now. If you're not disciplined enough to budget your time so that you get your road work in, you get your work in the gym, you're hitting the bag, the speed bag, the heavy bag, etc. That's going to show when you get to that tournament, right? So those little sort of micro lessons in discipline and time management have certainly been important throughout my life. When I think about the gist of Bid Whist, what comes to mind to me is that the best Bid Whist players remind me of the best boxers in this respect. The best boxers understand the fundamentals of the sport, right? Jab, the defense, etc. But they understand those fundamentals so well that they can transcend them, right? So I think about a fighter like Floyd Mayweather and how he moves from offense to defense, how he's got all the tools in his arsenal, right? And you don't know necessarily which style he's going to deploy. He's going to do what it takes to win. That's the same with the best Bid Whist players, right? They understand those foundational laws I set forth in this book. They understand the principles that we talk about, the strategic imperatives, depending on whether your role is the defender or you're the hand leader or the supporting partner. But then they mix it up, right? They transcend those fundamentals, and you don't know if they're going to be conservative or whether they're going to be aggressive. So I use a lot of boxing stories, a lot of boxing analogies to teach Bid Whist and to describe Bid Whist and to talk about some of the best players. So yeah, that's one of the things we try to accomplish in this book.
And so how does the boxing, again, instruction show up also in your life, in your law practice, in your leadership roles and sports management, and also in your other law practice?
Yeah, again, to me, it's all about the discipline, the time management, but also the goal setting, the short term goal setting, the midterm goal setting, the long term goal setting. And to me, it's always wonderful when something that maybe 6 months ago was your long term goal, but you've been doing what it takes on a day to day and a week to week basis, to accomplish your short term goals and your medium term goals. Now all of a sudden, that long term goal is your immediate short term goal if you've been disciplining yourself, along the path. So that's something that I think I learned early on as an amateur boxer that stayed with me throughout school, throughout college, throughout law school, throughout my career.
And so you mentioned fathering too as an important thing in your life. Talk about again the same impact of early instruction on how you show up as a dad, as a parent in a family.
Yeah, I will say that one of the inflection points in my path to writing this book happened when my daughter was about 8 years old. Her mom and I had gotten divorced, and we had her seeing a therapist. Had my daughter seeing a therapist, and the therapist asked, how do you feel about your new life? And Aaliyah says, I'm sad, I'm upset, I'm angry. The therapist says, have you told anybody about this? And my daughter says, well, I've told my dad about it. Well, why'd you tell him? Well, when I'm with my dad, we spend a lot of time playing cards, right? And she says, in her 8-year-old way, she says, when you're sitting there playing cards, you got to talk about something. So that sort of drove home for me, again, the fact that these games are more than just about connection and smack talking. I'm sorry, more than just about competition and smack talking. They're about connection. They're vehicles for connection. So playing cards with my daughter, playing cards with my son, with my wife, that's been, very, very important for me and an important part of our family dynamic, to be sure.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm talking to Lamont Jones, attorney, author of The Gist of Bid Whist. We'll continue the conversation in just a minute. We'll be right back. If you've not done so, consider getting vaccinated against the COVID-19 virus. At vaccine.gov, enter your zip code, your preferred vaccine type, and you'll get a map with locations eager to serve you. Getting vaccinated saves lives. Vaccine.gov can help you do your part. I think we lost some of that, but that's great. Well, listen, I want to ask you a couple of questions about Bid Whist and your work in that area. You mentioned a couple of luminaries, but who else have you played with? Who else do you identify as like people that are elevating awareness of Bid Whist?
Man, well, when we were in law school, we learned that Justice Thurgood Marshall had been a great Bid Whist player, right? So we would sort of use that to justify the time we spent. Hey, we're just trying to follow in the footsteps of the great Thurgood Marshall, right?
Sure.
But and it's been fun over the years to hear Bid Whist stories about Michael Jordan playing or Magic Johnson playing. As a Chicago guy, I've come to learn that Reverend Jesse Jackson is a big time Bid Whist player. Not so long ago, I was at an event and got to play cards with the actor Craig Robinson, comedian, actor, musician, another Chicago guy. I was at an event in Aspen, Colorado last summer, and I ran into a young fella who was telling me about playing Bid Whist, which surprised me because, generally speaking, we Bid Whist players are a bit older. But a fellow named Melvin Carter, Mayor Melvin Carter from St. Paul, tells me about his passion for Bid Whist and his family's playing the game. So I look forward to being able to sit down with Mayor Carter to play here soon, maybe along with my buddy Henry Lake and my buddy Caleb Truax there in Minneapolis. We can get us a nice little game going.
That'd be great. I saw Melvin a couple of days ago when we were at an event celebrating the Senator Raphael from Georgia. And so it was good to see him there. But Melvin, good guy, good mayor.
Good guy.
That would be fun. So when you guys do make that happen, let me know, because I'll come and document the experience. So something big is going on in St. Paul, right?
We'll have to come. We'll have to get Senator Tina Smith, who I had a chance to meet at an event a few months ago. It would be fun to get her to sit down and play with us as well.
That would be awesome. That would be awesome. So tell me more about other projects you're working on. What's down the road for you after the book? When did the book get published, number one?
February 27th. So we're, not quite a month out. And, we finished the first leg of the Just a Bid Whist book tour. We had stops in Brooklyn and several stops in the Los Angeles area. So we're preparing phase 2 of that book tour. And again, the mission is to get people playing Bid Whist and get people playing card games in general. I'm so happy that the Bicycle Playing Card Company is working with us because we share the mission of bringing the joy of cards to people. So yeah, we're working on phase 2 of that, and as I'm learning, as I'm meeting people and hearing their stories, I'm learning more and more about Bid Whist, more and more about card games. So that suggests to me that there could be another Bid Whist book in my future.
All right, sounds good. Have you written any other books? Or that's your first book?
This was the first one. This was the first one.
Talk about your law practice. I mentioned in the introduction that you not only are an enthusiast but a boxing business attorney, and you've mentioned your career as a amateur boxer, 200 plus bouts, and now working in that field. Any general observations about that field, boxing, where it is now? Because it seems to ebb and flow, to come and go in terms of popularity. And I don't know, where is boxing right now, you think?
Yeah, sure. Listen, we're very excited. March 30 will be the inaugural event of Premier Boxing Champions on Amazon. So we're very excited about that event, featuring Tim Zhu from Australia against Sebastian Fundora. Should be a great event. But man, there are a lot of terrific young fighters on the scene. Boxing's such a compelling sport. It's always going to be here. I think about the fact that having grown up as an amateur boxer, even when I was in law school, I knew that I wanted to work in the boxing business. So, learning about contracts and contract law and that sort of thing was very important to me. So I'm tickled that over all these years, I've sort of had a ringside seat to, some of the great boxing events of the past couple of decades. And that's just, been a personal thrill for me to, make a living doing something that I really enjoy.
Are boxers and entertainers better off than they were a generation ago? What's the basis for that question? The sense is that a generation ago or two, certainly, Joe Lewis's time, and before that and after it for a while, boxers did the work but didn't get paid. Our first big athletes in the other sports as well put the work in, but never got, the rewards that others might have gotten or that they deserved. What's the status in boxing in particular, and say in music in particular, the stories of exploitation of talent are rich. I mean, there where people, worked their butts off and never got the benefit of their blood, sweat, and tears or their creative genius. Has that changed now in the past generation as more of us are moving into the position of being able to be advisors, counselors, and lawyers representing artists?
Yeah, I don't have any experience in the music business, so I can't speak to that. And I'll share just one sort of general anecdote on that, which is that when Al Haymon started in the boxing business, he's shared this story, so I'm not speaking out of school here. But coming from his background as a concert promoter, he basically noticed that if he rented out an arena and put a musical artist in there for a show, at the end of the night, the artist made 90 cents, the promoter made a dime, and everybody was happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
His observation, though, was that in the boxing industry, that paradigm seemed to be flipped, right? The promotion seemed to keep the 90 cents. Each of the main event fighters might have gotten a nickel, and that's sort of the way it was. That's maybe what you were alluding to with some of the old days.
Exactly.
So one of his innovations, and he put this to work particularly with respect to Floyd Mayweather, is that he flipped that paradigm so that, at the end of the night, the boxer, Mayweather, kept the 90 cents. Maybe he paid a promoter that dime to do certain promotional tasks. And maybe that's why Mayweather became the highest paid athlete, not just boxer, of his generation, from his in-sport earnings, at least. So I certainly like to think that boxers, certainly the boxers at the top of the sport, understand their worth and have been able to leverage that for their benefit, the benefit of their families, and hopefully the Premier Boxing Champions platform has contributed to that.
Let me flip back to your family again, if you don't mind. I always ask my guests about their origin story. I'm curious as to, you said you're raised by your grandma. How far back in your family on both sides do you go? What's the genealogy of Lamont Jones?
Oh, boy.
Is it of interest to you? And how does it affect your life?
Sure, it's certainly of interest. I can't say that I've ever done sort of one of the the 23andMe tests or that sort of thing, and it's sometimes it's difficult to separate the lore from the actual documentation and that sort of thing. So I'm not able to go back much further than a couple generations. But one thing that strikes me is that for a time in my life, my grandmother's father lived with us. Okay, that my great grandfather. His father, my great grandfather, was born in 1907, if I'm not mistaken. But his father, who was an older man when my great grandfather was born, had been enslaved. So when people talk about slavery was so long ago, that sort of thing, it just occurs to me that a man who lived in the house with me growing up at times had been the son of a person who'd been enslaved. In some ways, that just reinforces that it just wasn't that long ago.
I'm glad you brought that up. Where I'm sitting now, I'm in my kitchen at my home in North Minneapolis, but the other place I do this show from is at my dining room table. And when I'm sitting there, in the background is a break front that I have photographs and stuff on, right? And one of the photographs there is one of me when I was 4 years old. I'm sitting on the couch in the living room of my uncle's house on 28th in Brooklyn in Kansas City. And this uncle was like the patriarch of the family, married to my mom's sister. We're sitting there, me and my cousins, on the ground, cross-legged, on the divan. Mr. Powell, the patriarch of the family, and his wife, Aunt Teola, Mrs. Powell, my mother, next to my mother, her mother, my grandmother, we called her Big Mama, and then next to Big Mama was her mother, Lizzie. Well, some years, but that picture's been sitting there on my mantle for years and years and years, and one day I happened to come home from watching 12 Years a Slave, sitting there. And it seemed like for no reason, the picture started glowing. And I said, what's this? And I looked at it and picked it up and thought about it and remembered my great-great-grandmother. This is a woman that I knew. I'm in the picture with her. She died in 1959. She was 100 years old. And so I said, this is a person, when she was born in Mississippi, was the property of other human beings. So it's like the sentiment you expressed. Your dad had a personal relationship with somebody, and I'm saying that I had a personal relationship. I remember her disciplining me when I was at their farm, their plantation stead, whatever you call it, in Mississippi. And I was going to stick my hand into a number 5 barrel of cotton. The cotton was overflowing. It was pretty. I'm 5 years old, looking up at the top of the barrel, and I want to touch this cotton candy looking stuff.
Sure.
And she cracked my knuckles with a spoon or something, saying, "Boy, don't put your hand in there. You don't know what's in that barrel. Could be a snake, right?"
There
I
you
remember
go.
that as an
Absolutely.
expression of love from my great grandmother. And as I think back, Brother Lamont, yes, I know that what we're talking about is not far away.
No
That
question.
Al McFarlane talked with a person and was loved by a person who, when she was born, was owned by other human beings.
Tough,
And
tough.
I can't get over it. I can't forget it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to forget it.
Yeah. I mentioned earlier that the area where I was born and raised, it's called Little Dixie, right? That's the name of the area. It's named that because the people who settled it first had come from the Confederacy, from the deeper South, and wanted to sort of, replicate what they had there in this part of Oklahoma. But I learned recently that the last Confederate general to surrender in the Civil War surrendered about 10 miles, about 15 miles from Hugo, Oklahoma, near Fort Towson, Oklahoma, right?
Okay.
So this was after after Appomattox, after even Juneteenth, right? But yeah, so growing up in Oklahoma, I didn't necessarily think that the Civil War, happened right in our backyard. But the fact that the last general surrendered 15 miles from where we grew up, maybe even around the time that my great grandfather's dad was a young person in that area, it really sort of brings home that kind of history.
Do you have any idea of your African lineage at all? Or do you claim African lineage, first of all?
Hey, of course. But yeah, I don't know, I don't know the specifics.
Okay. I'm curious. Have you traveled a lot in your work? Do you get around the world or primarily in this country?
No, man. That's the thing about, number one, I guess, getting older and having worked in the industry for a while. But yeah, China, Romania, obviously Mexico, Europe. Yeah, so boxing is a global sport, so we do have occasion to travel for different events and that sort of thing.
And what discoveries do you make? I love to travel, and I love when I'm able to go do stuff. And I go to the Caribbean all the time, but done some Europe and some Africa, and want to do more. But I love discovering how similar we are and how similar our situations are everywhere on the planet. But what are your discoveries in travel, and what stories do you have to tell?
Yeah, no, I'll tell you, it really heightens for me my sense of Americanness, right? So I like to describe myself as an American Black man, because and especially when I'm traveling abroad, you feel, I always feel my Blackness, but my sense of Americanness is sometimes heightened when I travel abroad.
Okay. And so when you observe other communities, through your lens as an American Black man, what are you seeing, and how are you interpreting other people's interactions with each other and with you?
You might have me on this one, Al. I'm not sure which direction we want to go on that.
Well, my thing is, as I travel, I look for similarities and situations where I see people solving problems for their personal, family, and community challenges and issues and things like that. And so my question is, do you find things in observing and interacting with other cultures that reflect lessons that you apply in our culture, or that reflect similar human-centric approaches to problem solving? And why am I asking the question? I think as Africans, as American Black people, sometimes we feel isolated by our experience here. And what I discover is that there is a freedom in seeing that we have not allowed ourselves to connect with our own people throughout the Caribbean, throughout South America, and in Africa. But we're beginning to do that, and technology affords us the opportunity to do that in a way where we can do transactions, we can do business. And if and as we find ways to do business with each other, it's opening up a new arena of development, opportunity, and wealth building. That's kind of where I'm coming from.
Sure.
And that's the general direction of the question. How do we get to know each other in ways that are better? And that the evidence of that is that we have enriched ourselves and each other by our association.
Sure. Man, I've found myself in situations where, I might go several days and not hear anyone even speaking English, right? Mm-hmm. But I recall a situation where that had happened, and then I found myself in a nightclub, and all the people on the dance floor are yelling out hip hop lyrics in English, right? This is the first English I've heard. So that shows to me, the power of the culture that we've developed here. And what it also suggests to me is that, just like, blues and hip hop and R&B music, and some extent the modern NBA, those are things that were sort of rooted in the Black community, but have since become sort of broader cultural offerings. I'm hoping the same for Bid Whist. I'm hoping the same for Bid Whist with the gist of Bid Whist. I think that it can become the next sort of rooted in the Black community pastime that blossoms into sort of a mainstream cultural force.
Let's wrap it up right there, Brother Lamont Jones, author of The Gist of Bid Whist. Thank you so much for being here. I'm glad to learn your story, and I want a ringside seat when you and Melvin Carter get a group together to play Bid Whist in St. Paul, Minnesota. Absolutely. Brother, thank you so much. Invite people one more time to buy your book. Where can they get it?
Al, thank you so much for having me on the conversation. I really appreciate it. But please pick up your copy of The Gist of Bid Whist and its tribute to the Pullman Porters at Amazon.com, at Barnes & Noble, and especially at your favorite bookstore.
Brother, thank you so much. We'll see you next time. I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time. Take care.